Thank you everyone for coming. We are here today to honor Dr. Samuel Borden, Sam. Shmuel ben Michal Upesha. We're here to honor Sam, to pay tribute to his life, and to show him the ultimate sign of respect in Jewish tradition, to accompany him here to his final resting place. We lost Sam this week at the age of 101. He is survived by his family, Marilyn and Rick, Myron and Ruth, Alan and Murray, his grandchildren, Jennifer and Brad, Jono, Carrie, and Emily, his great-granddaughter, Ava, and by his companion, Estelle. He was predeceased by his parents, Michal and Pesha, by his sister Anne, and by his loving wife, Shirley, all of blessed memory, Zichronam Livracha. The Jewish funeral service is based around the hesped, the eulogy. Today we'll get to hear eulogies from Jonathan, grandson, and from Myron, Sam's son. They asked me to bring a few introductory remarks. And I'm drawn, after learning about Sam and sitting with his family, to a passage in the Torah, in the Old Testament, the Bible, the book of Genesis, that speaks about our forefather Abraham, Avraham. At the end of his life, it says about Abraham, Ve'Avraham zaken ba bayamim, which translates to, and Abraham was old, advanced in years. The rabbis always ask this question, why would the Torah, which is purported to have no redundant phrases, no repetitive remarks, say the same thing twice? Is not to be old to be advanced in years? And so the answer comes that there are some people who demonstrate the dignity of age but never know the length of years. And there are some people who know the length of years but never know the dignity of age. And yet in the case of Abraham, of Avraham, our father, it was both. And so it was in the case of Sam Borden as well. A long life mixed with the dignity of age, with the knowledge throughout that to pursue what truly is your calling, what is your passion, to devote time to family, to give back. These are the things that enrich a life. Furthermore, should you live past 100. His family told me about his life as a teenager where he played violin in a youth orchestra, and they spoke of his lifelong love of sports, tennis, and of golf. Tennis was in fact how he met his wife. They met on the courts at Winnipeg Beach when he was 12. Sam's parents were immigrants from Eastern Europe. His father was a successful businessman, though he died at just the age of 57. His mother, Pesha, a legendary cook, and he and his older sister Anne grew up in a very fortunate, idyllic household. After marrying at 20 and graduating from dentistry, Sam enlisted in the Canadian Dental Corps during the war. He rose to the rank of captain. And although in the Army he was stationed with the Air Force, he had postings throughout Western Canada, including Edmonton and Red Deer, and finally on the Alaska Highway, where he flew around doing dental work. Once the war ended in 1946, he returned to Winnipeg, where he and Shirley raised their family. He learned about family from his own. He was a devoted son who loved his mother and adored his father. As we mentioned, he lost his father young, but along with his sister took care of their mother for the rest of her life. For many years, Sam enjoyed the social group of friends who played poker and met on a regular basis. He and Shirley had many friends and kept close to family. In a very special year of 1979, Sam, by then working at the university as a teacher, took a sabbatical, and he and Shirley spent much of the year abroad, with long stays in Israel and in Spain. After an illness and after 72 years of marriage, Shaarey died in 2016. And at 92, Sam found himself alone. Soon after, his love of golf brought him into contact with Estelle, a longtime family friend, and together their connection blossomed into a love that continued for the rest of his life. Sam loved his profession. He said that when he was young, a wise mentor told him that if you love what you do, you will never have to work a day in your life. He lived it and passed it on to his children. A kind, patient, and loving father, always upbeat, always willing to help his family, friends, and even strangers. He was a student of life, especially of golf. But these are the things that made him a great teacher as well. A thirst for knowledge that never ended, that he kept until the end. Independent, wise, and a mensch. And like in the case of our forefather Abraham, length of years that coincided with the dignity of age. May his memory be for a blessing, and may he rest in peace. John.
Thank you to everyone who made it here today, and to those watching from home. I'm Jono, Sam's grandson, and I had the privilege of golfing with Zaid for 40 years. It sounds ridiculous. Who golfs with their grandpa hundreds of times over 4 straight decades till age 99 and loses almost every single time? He truly loved the game of golf. He especially loved golfing in his younger years with his pals Frank and Percy, with my dad, and later with my mom. He had a whole golf crew in Scottsdale, and he continued playing right through his 90s with Estelle, which meant I would often finish in 3rd place. It was only a couple weeks ago I dropped him off at the Olive Garden, Estelle and I. We pulled up in rush hour traffic on Portage Avenue and caused a minor traffic jam trying to get him close to the front door. In his defense, he would have much preferred to drive himself if he hadn't recently and reluctantly sold his car, which looked like it had about 75 unreported accidents. His last 20 years were legendary. He outlived almost everybody. He didn't drink or smoke, and he didn't eat vegetables. He hated vegetables, especially broccoli. At age 99, he was golfing, driving, and going on dates. He always seemed content, always in a good mood, and never, ever, ever whined about anything. In my grandma's last years, he looked after her pretty much 24/7 and didn't mind doing it one bit. When I asked him about it, all he said was he was the luckiest man in the world to be married to her for 72 years. In recent years, he would hook himself up at night to his dialysis machine every single night. If you asked him, how was the machine and how did you sleep, all he would say was, it was great, with a smile. He could barely hear anything, but he loved going for dinner and brunch, especially to all the loudest restaurants. Sometime after my grandma passed, he wanted to change it up one night. Instead of going to Earl's, he said to me, why don't we try the Pancake House? I knew right away something was up. He started with the usual, how was your mom and dad? And, did you see the photos Jen sent of Ava? He absolutely loved talking about his great-granddaughter. But then he got emotional. I was expecting some bad news, but I was wrong. He told me he had reached out to someone that both he and my grandma knew and liked very much, and that they started, quote, golfing together. There's no doubt in my mind that Estelle extended his life by 8.5 years. They played golf, went for dinner, went on trips together, and they even had a jam-packed social calendar for as long as he was able. It was an incredible final chapter to an incredible life. We lost a great man this week. He will be missed. But I was the luckiest grandson in the world who got to spend 44 years with my grandpa.
If you're mourning for my father, don't. If you're feeling sorry for him, don't. There's plenty of other things to mourn about and feel sorry for. The last person in the world you need to feel sorry for is my father. And he would say it if he was here. He was an extraordinary man who led an extraordinary life. Last September the 20th, he became closer to 102 than he did to 101. In the hospital, in his final days, he had moments of lucidity. I've shared this with a few of you. And in one of those moments, Ruthie and I happened to be there at this time, and we were rubbing his hands. His eyes were closed. We didn't know if he could hear us. We were talking to him, and he opened his eyes, and he smiled, and he looked at both of us, and he held our hands, and he said, "It's okay, it's okay," giving us permission to be okay. That's what he was telling us. And he said, you know, who gets to be 101? I'm the luckiest person alive. And just be okay. Told us how much he loved us. And he lifted our hands as best he could. And he kissed us both. And that was the last time that I had a chance to talk to him in person. I'll talk to him lots over the years, hopefully. Maybe not in person. All my life, I've been told that I look like my father. All my life. And all my life I've had the same response. I never aspired to look like my father. I always wanted to be half as nice. And a lot of you here have said that to me over the years, and I'll tell you what's interesting. Every time I said I'd like to be half as nice, I was hoping at least one person would say, "Oh, you're more than half as nice." In my entire lifetime, that never happened. And for the longest time it bothered me. Why is it that every time I say I want to be half as nice, some people say, "Yeah, you are," and others don't say anything? So that was the best I could be. And then as I got a little older, a little wiser, I realized those comments weren't about me. They were about my dad and how exceptionally nice he was and what a high bar it would be to even be half as nice. So I took it as a compliment. But it took me a while. The child in me internalized it, and the adult in me got a little smarter. My father was kind. He was caring, he was considerate, he was compassionate, he was loving, he was loyal to a fault, he was fiercely supportive. In 73 years, I never once heard my father say a bad thing about anybody. Not once in 73 years. And that actually, to be honest with you, made me absolutely crazy. Because you know what it's like when you're mad at somebody, a family member, a relative, a neighbor, and you want to vent? He's the wrong guy to go to because he would never play the game with you. He always found good in somebody. Almost always. He wasn't naive. He wasn't Pollyannish about human behavior. He understood that there are genuinely rotten people in this world. And so if we talked about them, he just wouldn't say anything. But never, ever a bad word. That was my father, our father. Yeah. In his life, excuse me. I had so many thoughts. How ironic that a person that lived 101, and this is what it ends up at. Every word important, but maybe it's a lesson for everyone as we live our lives. When you were with my father, he was with you, really with you. He had your attention 100%. His eyes weren't darting to look at other people. He wasn't listening to other conversations. He had your full attention. And he was inquisitive. He was curious. He would ask how your day was, what you were planning the next day, how life was, rarely talking about himself. And when you were with him, you generally felt that you were the most important person in his life. And you were. You were. Because that was one of my father's beautiful traits. He made everybody feel special because you were the most important person in his life. That's how he felt. And that's how he lived his life. He was a beautiful man. When my father was turning 50, in March of 1973, my mother was putting together a scrapbook for him. I was 22 years old, married, out of the house, and she called and said, "Would you like to see a sneak preview, because I'm still working it out?" We said we'd love to, so Ruthie and I ran over to the house, and there strewn all over the dining room table were all of these articles and pictures and newspaper clippings about my father, about his prowess in track and field. Didn't know he was a track star, had no idea. And all of these pictures about Sam Borditsky. And the headlines were, "Sam Borditsky wins again, wins second title in a row, rolls over opponent in straight sets." And I said, "Ma," she says, "What?" I said, "What's this all about?" 22 years old, an adult, married. I didn't know my father was a tennis champion. I had no idea. And I'm telling the rabbi yesterday, I'm not sure if he won 2 years in a row or 3 years in a row the provincial championship as a junior, age 16, 17, 18. But for my purposes, let's go with 3. And if anybody here wants to argue with me, we'll do that later. So that was my father. My dad was a periodontist, as many of you know. He was a gum specialist. And in very early years of his life, he decided he really wasn't that happy. And while it might be a bit of a problem for the rest of the family, because he was earning a very nice living, and was about to do something that was absolutely crazy to everybody else, he'd accepted a position as an associate professor at the dental college. He was going to go teach and follow a lifelong dream of his for a fraction of the income. A fraction of the income. Who does that? He did it. He did it. There's one word that I think best describes my father. When thinking about his life for the last number of months, I've been thinking about how you could capture his essence, his true soul, what he was all about, his reason for being here. And it was impossible. It was impossible to do it in a sentence. impossible to do it in a paragraph. So I thought, let's see if we can do this in one word. What would the word be? And I kept thinking, well, he was kind, but that didn't do it. He was caring, that didn't do it. Supportive. Yeah, but he was other things too. That wasn't capturing his essence. And I came up with a word, and I think it's a perfect word for my father, because it's how he lived his life. It's why he lived his life. And the word is selfless. Selfless. And selfless is described, plainly put, as thinking and caring about others more than you think and care about yourself. And not caring so much about yourself includes fame, power, position, and money. And that's how he lived his life. It was never about him. It was never about fame. It was never about power. He was willing to give all of that up. It was never about money. He was willing to give that up. He wanted to follow a dream. He wanted to be happy. And that might be, as far as I know and I can think of, the only selfish act he ever committed. Because he did that for himself. But he did it for himself in order to help so many people and provide so much joy and so much education to all those that were there at the dental college. It was such a joy for him to wake up every morning and love what he was doing. It really was a joy. It was. And I think one or two of his finest moments in the profession, one was when he won, a few years after he started teaching, he won an award called the Dr. H.H. Saunderson Award for Teaching Excellence. This award was given out to one professor, one, each year, affiliated with the University of Manitoba. I'm looking at Jack Lipkin right now and others. I'm sure you were very instrumental in him getting this award, and I'll forever be in your debt, all of you that were involved, because this was one of the happiest, proudest moments of his life. And he never strutted around like a peacock, my dad. It was never about him. But for one day and one day only, when he went to convocation and they gave him this award, it was an absolute affirmation of his life choice, of giving up dentistry and going to teach. It was an affirmation that he had made the right decision, that he was loved and cared for by his students, and that's what he cared about the most. So thank you to those of you that were involved in that. He was so happy. And then if you fast forward 30 or 40 years, thanks to a number of you here as well, and through a lot of red tape and Herculean efforts in terms of human capital and energy and time and money, we now have at the dental college the Dr. Sam Borden Periodontology Specialty Clinic, and that made him so happy in his later years, just a few years ago. Made him so happy, and I'm sure it gave him a lot of life and a lot of extra years. So thank you for all of you that were involved in that as well. The win-win with the clinic, in terms of my father, as far as he could see, was it provided high care, quality health care that was supervised to thousands of Manitobans that otherwise couldn't get that care. And it also provided an opportunity for young graduates in dentistry to specialize and hone their skills before they went out into the marketplace and did their damage. I want to tell a story. Some of you have heard it before. Estelle, I just told you the other day. If you've heard it, I'm not apologizing. Listen to it again, because it's really a good story. My parents were having a dinner party. They had just left their house, and they were in their condo at 200 Tuxedo. And they invited Ruthie and I to join them for dessert. And we said, sure. And we got there for dessert. And in those days, as you would have it, all the women ended up in the kitchen, dealing with the dishes, and the men were sitting at the dining room table, telling tall tales and lying through their teeth. And four or five guys there. And one of them starts to talk about golf. And he says, let's go around the table and talk about holes in one. How many does everybody have? He says, I have one. I've been golfing for 40 years. Next guy says, I've been playing for 20 years. I have none. Next guy says, I've been playing my whole life. I have one. It was my turn. I said I had won. I started to describe it in detail. They said, Myron, we don't need the details. We know you. You have won. So that's good. Went around the table to my father. He looked at me sheepishly. Now I knew. My father and I joined Glendale Country Club at the same time. He was 39. I was 11. And after a couple of years of playing, my father got the first hole-in-one. And he never let me forget it, that he had one and I had none. And when I got my hole-in-one, Ruthie and I were going out of town for a couple of weeks to the lake. So I got it, we hightailed it out. I remember calling my father and saying, Dad, I just got my first hole-in-one, we're tied. And he was so happy for me. So happy. That's the background. It's his turn to tell how many holes-in-one he has. And he says 2. And my heart sank because I knew my father, and the one thing I knew about him was he didn't lie. He's not a liar. He's not an exaggerator. It's never about him. He's always uncomfortable talking about himself. And it made me crazy that I was seeing a side of my father that I just didn't like. And dinner finished. Everybody left. My dad says, hang on for a minute. I said, sure. He says, I want to show you something. I said, okay. And he goes into the dining room and he pulls out an article that he has that he kept. And it was an article written by the late great Ed Dearden, the sports writer for the Winnipeg Tribune. And it was about 3 or 4 lines about a father and son team, Dr. Sam Borden and Myron Borden, who got a hole-in-one on the same day, on the same golf course, not playing together, an hour apart. So you get it. My father never wanted to take the spotlight off me for my first hole-in-one. He was so happy for me. And all those years, I had to hide the fact that he'd gotten a second one on the same day. He just didn't want any attention. And if you're golfers, you understand what that really means, because getting a hole-in-one is very, very important. I'm looking at Michael Averback now. It took him a long time to get one. I don't know how many he has now, but we celebrated a few times together. It's very important. So to deny it is to me, just speaks volumes as what a man he is, because he is truly selfless. Selfless. Caring more about others than he cares about himself. Marilyn, I'm going to say something. You and I, nobody knows this, have had a running feud for the last 60 years. Alan wasn't a part of it only because he was too young when it started out. Otherwise he would be. Not a feud, maybe, a friendly competition. And the competition was, who did Dad love the most? And Marilyn said, I think it's me. But she didn't think it was her. She hoped it was her. And I said, I think it's me. And I didn't think it was me. I hoped it was me. And after 60 years, with Dad's passing, and never being able to get a final answer from him, I'm prepared to tell you what I think. I think that Dad loved you the most, and I think he loved me the most. And Alan, I think he loved you the most too. Love is infinitely divisible, and if someone could deal with that, it would certainly be my father. So I hope this ends the feud and we can be friends again. Estelle, I know Jono had already said some lovely things about you. I want to reiterate that you came into my father's life at a time where he really needed you. He was in a pretty severe depression after my mother passed away. And I know you lifted him out of that. And as Jono said, you absolutely gave him what I like to think of as bonus. A bonus 8.5 years. But they weren't just 8.5 years, they were quality 8.5 years, because you did everything. You guys were never home. We would call, you were never home, and Ruth and I would look at each other. Why are we home and they're never home? They're 100 years old. Estelle's what she is, I won't say. 49. Thank you, Brad. So thank you for keeping him young. Thank you for giving him the extra 8.5 years, the bonus years. But from my family and I, thank you so much for giving us the extra 8.5 years too, that we were able to share with him, because he was such a special man. So thank you. And I think now comes, for me, the toughest part. I remember saying this and feeling this 8 years ago, 8.5 years ago, when my mother passed away, and I had the mic, that I didn't want to give it up, because giving it up means, to some degree, having to accept the fact that you need to say goodbye. You need to let go. So while I'm prepared to let go of the mic, Dad, and I know you're listening, I promise your family will never let go. We will always remember you. We love you so much. If there was a poster child for a life well lived, you would be it. From a personal standpoint, as a father, you were absolutely wonderful. I had you in my life for 73 years. I can't imagine any son wanting anything more from a father than what you gave me. So, thank you for that. And now I guess it's time to say, rest peacefully. You've earned it. And one last thing before I let go of the mic, Dad. When we had that chat in the hospital, and you held our hands, and we had a brief conversation while you were able, you were right. No regrets.
Thank you, Myron. Thank you, Jono. Beautiful eulogies. Chant a short series of passages in Hebrew in a selection called Sidu Kadin, and then we chant the El Malei Rachamim, the traditional memorial prayer in honor of Sam Borden. Hatzur tamim palo kichol racham mishpat el amon aveinav el tzadik v'yesharu tzadik atarnai lamidu l'hachayot asher yerchav higadon kol ruchot chalil lecha zichronenu limchot v'yihiu nainecha v'rachamim alinu fekuchot ki lecha adon harachamim ve'aslichot Adonai natan v'Adonai lekach Yishem Adonai mevorach. God gives, God takes, blessed be the name of God. V'hu rachum yechaper bon v'lo yashchid, v'yirba l'shiva po v'yirko chamato, v'yashov, v'afar al ha'reshaya, v'aruach tashuv el ha'elohim asher netana. Okay, one second, everyone. In light of it being in the middle of the service and it being hot, we do want to continue, but I know I saw that Bill is it a stable situation that would be respectful if we continued? I don't want to do the wrong thing here. He's okay? Okay. Thanks, everyone. If you've called an ambulance, we'll try and move along so that we can, before they get here, and we'll continue. Okay. Thank you. The last passage that we chanted in the Hebrew is, "The dust returns to the earth as it was, but the spirit returns to God who gave it. May Samuel Borden's soul be bound up in the bond of life eternal, and may God, Adonai, send comfort to those who mourn, and grant strength to those whose burden is sorrow." Nishmat Shmuel ben Michal Pesha Shelach Leo Lamo Began Eiden Menuchato Anabal Harachamim Hastire Veseiter Kenafecha Leolamim Utzror Vitzror Achaim En Nishmato Adonai Nachavato V'yanua Meshalom Amishkavo and Omar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Sam Borden, who has gone to its eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that he find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. A feeling that was at the end of its experience. Thank you again, everyone, for coming. Thank you to these folks for helping. Thank you to our pallbearers in the mitzvah of everyone being here, accompanying Sam to his final resting place. As we mentioned, it's the ultimate form of respect in Jewish tradition, which is why in a moment the family will lead us and then everyone will be able to participate in the mitzvah, the selfless, to borrow a word, act of burying Sam with our own hands, shoveling earth into the grave ourselves. Again, the family will lead us and everyone is invited to participate. There are multiple shovels. I'll move out of the way. People can line up at both sides. There's even a small pail here with a shovel so people can participate even if they aren't sure about using the large shovels. There are different customs when it comes to this ritual. Most people pour 3 shovelfuls of earth. Some people use the front of the shovel, but some people, as if trying to send a subtle message of disapproval to God, have been known to use the back of the shovel. Some people turn it midway. Other people will pass the shovel to the next person, but some people return it to the earth as if reluctant to pass on what could be perceived as a burden, because it is a painful act. But we remind ourselves it's an act born of love and compassion for someone who meant so much to so many people. I've often remarked that if you live very long, sometimes at the funeral service that honors you, there aren't very many people just because there aren't very many people left. But when a lot of people turn out for somebody who lived to be 101, you recognize the multi-generational impact each one of us has the potential to achieve in our life, and in this case, Sam Borden certainly realized over his century. There will be a meal of consolation where you can share stories and you can console the family at 200 Tuxedo in the party room after our service here. Thank you again, everyone, for coming. Thank you to the family for the honor. Before we shovel earth and close our ceremony, we will recite together the mourners. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabah, be'alma divrat irutei v'amlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'vyomechon u'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'gala u'izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shmei Rabah mevorach le'olam u'lamei almayah. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'tadar, v'taleh, v'talal, shmei dekudsha, brifu. Le'ela, v'kol birchata, shirata, tushbechata, v'nechemata, damiran be'alma, v'ibru, amen. Yehi shlama Rabah min Shemaya, v'chayim aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, v'ibru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, v'yaseh shalom, aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, v'ibru, amen. May the one who creates peace and harmony on high bring peace and harmony to us, to all Israel, and to all humanity. As again together we can say, Amen. And to the family, we offer these traditional words. Hamakom yinachem etchem, b'toch sha'ar evelei Tzion Yerushalayim. May you be comforted and consoled among all those in our community who are or who have ever been. Thank you again, everyone, for your presence. I invite the family